All right, let's get started. If we could have our panelists come up and take their seats. So industry, of course, is something that Drexel specializes in. We all have that crash course basically pushed out of the nest of let's actually experience this in the workplace. And a lot of us do know what we want out of an actual real life job, I think, after doing co-ops. You could argue that. And we know what kind of questions to ask, and that was something that we really saw in the RSVPs. Again, in the comments section, a lot of our attendees wanted to know how to actually approach this in an industry setting, what to do during co-op when we have this sort of experience. And my heart always breaks anytime that I hear anybody talk about something they experienced like this during their co-op. And even for those who haven't experienced that those obstacles when they go out and take a real job outside of college and really don't have any experiences to speak of like this and don't feel qualified to be on this sort of panel, I'm just very glad that they don't have any of those experiences. So I wanted to ask about how you all are involved in this, both now and what you've experienced, very similar to what we did during the academic panel, but also you guys come from such diverse companies, diverse work environments, and would really like to see how that factors in. So I will start off with, again, who you are, what you do, where you come from, work-wise.
Start at the end.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan Irons. I am the founder and chief science officer of the company Deep Space Ecology. We work to solve food sustainability problems in space by concurrently working to solve food security problems here on Earth. So we commonly work in the space industry, the agricultural industry, and the biological research industry. And that's what my background is in. I attended Duke University and got my Bachelor of Science degrees in environmental science, biology, chemistry, and I also did the pre-medicine track, so I could have that aspect to look on as well. And so pretty much what I can talk about with you guys is what it's like to enter the space industry as a woman, as well as being a person coming right out of university, being an entrepreneur at the age of 23, and what it's like to be at a young age in an industry where having a higher level of education or being older is such a huge component of it, especially with so much old guard, you could say, in NASA and other industries and companies.
Hi everyone, my name is Jake Voorhees and I run a video platform for empowering young engineers. And within that, I love to tell the stories of historically underrepresented demos. Like when I do interviews, it's generally a woman or some sort of minority engineer of some fashion, because people who look like me, it's old news, it's boring, no one cares, no one wants to hear that story anyways, right? So, besides that, what I also do is Morgan and I are also board members of the Mars Generation. She's actually the co-chairwoman of that board for the Student Space Ambassadors, and I'm heavily involved with Discover E, who I think they founded the Woman in Engineering Week, or Tell a Woman Engineering Story. I can't remember exactly how it's said, but planning the Global Marathon Session, which is all about inspiring women to pursue careers in STEM and things like that. So I've made it my mission to break the status quo, which I think is why we're all here today. Oh, yeah.
Hi, my name is Sandra Beck. I work for the U.S. Navy. I have been a mechanical engineer working in air conditioning and refrigeration systems on board naval vessels. I average about 60 to 80% of the time working on the road. I spend a great deal of time working with sailors. In case you don't know, in addition to engineering being a very male-dominated field, the Department of Defense industry is a very male-dominated industry, so there's a very small population of women, and definitely a very small population of women working as technicians or engineers. So you get a lot of opportunity to face stereotypes, especially with how the military defines masculine. So if you guys have any questions about stereotypes and how to address those in a field, especially in engineering where you're surrounded by men, I can address those sorts of questions. I've also relocated here from Colorado, and I'll be taking a detail assignment down in DC. I can talk to you about relocation and how to approach new jobs in a new area and overcoming those sorts of fears and how to look at your career not just as a limit of where you can be locally, but to expand and broaden what you think you're capable of.
Hello, everyone. I am Mikalia, known as Mickey Gracie. I work for your local utility company, PECO. I'm out of Warminster. I used to be here at 23rd and Market Street. I'm an electrical engineer in Warminster. I work with new construction, meaning that if there's a new building that's going up, you know about it. We supply the electricity there. Also, if you're doing a remodeling, then we would, make your area safe so that you don't touch any power lines while you're reconstructing and all. I went to Howard University down in Washington, D.C. I do have a love for Drexel. My husband went here and graduated from here, so I'm glad to be here and see what he experienced. Hopefully, what I leave you guys with is a sense of confidence today, and know that you are here for a reason, and that you will enter the workforce with that same confidence and know who you are, and that you're here, one, to accomplish what you already know that you could accomplish. So that is my goal today. Being a minority in the electrical engineering field, I've been in the power industry my whole career, I will say that. I did intern at NASA while I was in college at Goddard Space Flight Center. I realized that wasn't for me for programming, so I decided to become an electrical engineer. So make sure you do your co-ops. No matter, you will get something out of that experience. I'm hoping to address any questions you have, whether it's in the power field industry or being a minority or just anything. So anything you guys, please feel free to ask.
Good afternoon. My name is Mitchell Swan. I am a graduate of Drexel University. When I went here, this building was a bar. But anyway, there were 2 bars roughly right in the strip. They're gone now. Let's see. I wanted to touch on just a couple things. I work in the consulting engineering field. I heard some people mention that in their little stories. First point, I think a young woman was an architect. There is an organization called the National Organization of Minority Architects. So you don't find a NSBE or a SWE for women in architecture or minorities in architecture. You can check out the National Organization of Minority Architects. I don't know if there's a chapter at Drexel, but I do know there's a chapter in Philadelphia, and so you can go from there. I'm a licensed engineer, a PE, professional engineer. I've been registered for a long time now, so I think there was a comment about that. If you're going to work in consulting, you're really going to need that. You can always take the test. If you're a senior in school right now and you're even thinking about getting a PE, matter of fact, I would do this anyway. Take your EIT, the Fundamentals in Engineering exam, okay? You're going to be taking that's available to you in the spring. If you even think about consulting, the EIT or FE exam is a heck of a lot easier when you're a senior in school than when you get out, because your ability to remember that stuff drops off exponentially. Like by July of graduation year, stoichiometric balance of who, what? Don't have no idea what they're talking about. So get that done. Because once you pass it, it's clear. And so now if you decide to get a PE, you've already got that taken care of. So I can talk to you, I guess, about the consulting world. I'm a partner in an engineering consulting firm. I did a lot of design and construct, including chiller plants and refrigeration plants, so I'm familiar with that. I actually used to be naval engineering way back, but now what I do is forensic engineering and forensic project management and expert witness testimony. So people have problems, and I testify in court that it was the butler in the conservatory with a butcher knife.
All right. So my first question for you all is, do you feel like has anybody else ever assumed anything in your career path based on your identity? Has that ever become an issue for you?
Who wants to go first?
So this is a relatively recent story. I was at a conference out in California, and I was speaking at the conference. and I was talking about the thesis research that I had been doing at Duke. And afterwards, this woman came up to me, and I'm not going to say any names, just to keep everyone's identity to themselves, but she was a director for a large group. And you could immediately tell she had microaggressions, like against what I was talking about. She got to the point where she was saying that I wasn't an ecologist, like I wasn't educated enough to speak on the thesis research that I had gone through 2 cross-examinations to get approved. And inside, I was kind of in turmoil. I was like, especially like, she was a woman. I was like, oh, she's gonna like say something nice to me, but she wasn't. And just that assumption that not only men, but also women can also be biased against you and have those microaggressions against you. And I just made sure I stayed calm in the situation, especially since I had been through 2 cross-examinations and I knew my stuff when it came to this research. So I stayed calm, explained to her pretty much that I was able to be qualified to present this research and that I had done this research. And what I learned from that situation was just remaining calm and not getting the rise that that person may be expecting is very important, because it puts you in a good place and you have no regrets afterwards. And later I learned, when I was talking with another person who knew this woman, that she actually acts this way with everyone. So it wasn't actually something against me particularly. She just had this kind of personality that she just kind of turned a lot of people off when she spoke with them. So I would say the 2 takeaways from that is remaining calm in situations even when inside your mind you're in turmoil about the situation, and using the knowledge and experiences that you are confident that you can represent yourself and your research, and just being also observant as well. Maybe this person is having a bad day, maybe this is just their personality, and maybe it's not something particularly about you that's causing them to act this way.
Right out of college, I went out to California. I got a job at a utility company there. And so I worked in it, was known as a district engineer, responsible for basically downtown San Diego down to the border. And I remember my first day coming in, I sat up, in my office, and then somebody came in asking me just a general question. I was like, I don't know. He was like, aren't you the admin? I was like, no, I'm the engineer. He was like, no, you're not. I was like, I am. It's right here. So that was like my first or second day, and then I started to feel like, oh my gosh, like a sense of not belonging. So the day, as time goes on, I also supervised troubleshooters, which were all men. They're like the first responders for our outage. And so they would be talking about stuff and I couldn't relate. So I started taking golf lessons, Nike golf lessons. I sucked. I hated it and I sucked. So after failing at Nike golf lessons, I remember calling my friend. He's like, you could do this, just stick in there. And finally, I just ended up talking about my family to the group of guys. And they could relate. And from then on, I figured out what was important. I knew what was important to me, always family. But knowing that, what I found out in that moment was, I don't have to try to be anything or do anything else. Finding connections with people, everybody has that individual connection. And so my connection with the guys was family, because that's what's important to me. Mine is the other thing. Some guys are dancers, I'm a dancer too, but mainly our main connection was family. And so once I made that connection, it made it more easier, and I felt comfortable with myself and being in a role and confident, saying, hey, just because I'm a female in this role doesn't mean that people can make me seem like I'm less qualified or anything else. I have the knowledge. I made it through school, so I know that I can do this. So that's my story.
I guess, I would say that is a rather common problem in certain respects, depending upon, women or, diverse always kind of annoys me as a term, because I think, what do you mean? Like some people like taxidermy, not a lot of people like that. That's diverse. But person of color, that is a common problem, a common challenge. Basically, the assumption is that, often, the assumption is that you are less qualified or you have to prove your competency, whereas, and I have to be blunt, a white male walks in and it is assumed he is competent. So it's like you're starting a football game from a touchdown behind, and you're kind of going, gee, we just kicked off and I'm behind 7-zip. Why is that? And that's a bit of a challenge, and I would say that I go through that still today. I also think, and I think Morgan touched on it, it's important to recognize your own bias that you might bring to the table too. You may look at someone and one person's assertive is another person's aggression. One person's demanding is another person's, I'll use the term, pardon it, but bitchy. And so I see that happen all the time. People kind of look at one person's behavior and say, oh, the real go-getter. The other person, boy, that guy's pushy. And you say, how much difference is there between being a go-getter and pushy? Or is it just a matter of who's doing the pushing? Okay, so I think it's very important for us to recognize our own, I guess I'll use the term, I don't know if you're familiar with reptile brain. We all kind of have that sort of our first initial reaction, flight or fight. You have to quell your reptile and go, am I reacting based on some preconceived notion of what I think a person should be? Or am I actually reacting to the information that I have in front of me and thinking my way through it? Sometimes you got to talk your reptile back into the cage.
Yeah, I'll add to this in sort of a different angle, being that I am white, male, raised in a Christian family and straight and this sort of thing, and born with the extra touchdown, like that analogy. But one of the challenges that I face with assumptions is not me personally, but in building my community of progressivism and diversity and these sort of foundations that I believe in and preaching these is every once in a while, and this actually happened to me lately, another white engineering male will speak out and then we'll have a private conversation and almost attack me because of what I'm doing to promote women in engineering, minorities in engineering. Let me give you an example. I said, listen guys, if you want to be interviewed on the show, okay, great. If you're a white male, you can be on the show, you have to be doing extra stuff because everyone knows here you have advantages as a white male in America today or in the West today. And he freaked out about it, okay? And was calling me all these types of things. So one of the assumptions that I have to make sure I'm very careful with is kind of leaving the breadcrumbs and allowing these people who are placing the assumptions in the world to learn and grow themselves over time. And sometimes it's a little bit too fast for everyone. And I know you guys can relate to this, that the old 60-year-old white guy, it may take a whole year of these progressive ideas and lots of stories and lots of the things that you'll hear today for them to change their thoughts themselves. So I've had to learn not to make assumptions about the acceptance of progressivism and work it over time.
So I'll start with a story as well. When I was relatively new, I would say maybe a year or two in, there was an opportunity to travel to Japan to do some work. My boss went around asking if people were available, and I happened to be excluded from that invitation to go. And I found out later that he selected another male engineer to go in my place, and I asked him why he didn't consider me to make that trip. And he said, well, I didn't want you to go alone your first time to Japan overseas. And I looked at him and I was like, but the male engineer you sent has never been overseas or to Japan. So why was that standard different? And he said he didn't realize that that was the case. But if that was what he was measuring a capability of, then that should have been the question he asked to that engineer as well as to me. And when I talked to him about it and whether it was fair, the next time a trip came up and it was on something that was under my purview, under my authority at work, it was actually to the Middle East. And I was perfectly comfortable making that trip. I had made all the arrangements, and my boss did not put any obstacles in my way for that trip. And then it was actually one of my coworkers who came up to me and said, Sandy, I don't think you should travel there. It's not safe for women. I was like, look, I've already made the arrangements. I've discussed how to get from the airport to the hotel, from the hotel to the ship. And I was like, everything's set up. And I was like, I've been briefed by NCIS. We know what the restrictions are and what the problems might be when I get there. And I was like, at this point, you know, there's nothing from NCIS's perspective or from management's perspective that says that me as a female, I can't go there. So I'm not gonna fail to support what I think I can do simply because someone else is uncomfortable with the idea of a female in the Middle East. So a lot of the times you're getting past people's stereotypes, whether it's oh, I need to protect you or I need to look out for you. And a lot of that's showing your own confidence in the fact that you can do this. And regardless of whether or not as a female you feel comfortable going to various countries, that's something that you need to make a decision for yourself and then present that to whether or not it's your lead at work or your manager, and just make sure that they understand that you're comfortable doing something, and that if there's ever any reason you don't feel safe, that you'll bring that to their attention, but you would like to be considered equally for all these opportunities. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just a matter of explaining that to them, and they'll come back, and when the next opportunity comes up, they'll consider you, and they won't put those obstacles in your way.
All right, on that note, one of our questions from the cards earlier, to repeat, do you feel that women or people of color may not choose to pursue higher level positions or advanced certifications for reasons other than time or money, although those might even factor in more subtle ways?
I don't know about the higher level positions. I think that if you're in the industrial sector, you're working for General Motors or IBM or maybe the Navy, the pressure to get a PE is not as great because of just the nature of how that structure works. I think that within other organizations, there can be some disincentives or a thought that you won't be able to be very successful at certain levels, especially in the consulting world, because the consulting world is very much driven by the ability to generate revenue. You have to get customers. And so if you don't think you can get customers, you may choose to go do something else. And having a PE in a consulting engineering role or having an RA as an architect, and I speak from the built environment perspective, is very, very important to garnering work. So I could see where that would be somewhat dissuading to people to move up in that row.
So I think it depends on the company. My first company, they wanted you to have your FE within 2 years of working there. So I did that, and it is much harder when you get out. So make sure you do it while you're in school. I mean, I failed the first time, passed the second time, but it is a lot of work. So please get it done if you're going to do it in school. So they put a lot of pressure on that, and they wanted you to also get your PE. People want you to, they want you to get your FE, but it's not that you have to move up. It's not required for you to move up. So I'm a senior engineer, but I don't have my PE because of my experience and what I do. So I think it's a personal choice. If you study, you can pass the test, and if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. But it's not required in all industries, I would say. But it takes a lot of commitment. I'm a PMP, so I chose to take the PMP. Even though I have my FE, I could go and take the PE, but I chose to take the PMP because I do more project management side of things. So there's other options out there. Other tests, depends which way you want to go.
Yeah,
He is project management professional, offered by the project management institute.
which any type of engineer can get, I assume, right? Pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, you just go through training from PMI.
Yeah, so who here is a civil engineer? Okay, you guys definitely need to get your PE. It's pretty much mandatory in the field. I know a couple of my colleagues in here, Charlie and Danny, can speak to that. So there's no question. definitely take the FE when you're a senior in college here at Drexel, or if you're coming from other universities. It also looks good when you're applying and this type of thing, but it's basically career suicide if you don't. Now, if you're a mechanical engineer, it depends, right? If you're working for a company that designs things, you're gonna need it. Now, if you work for some of the faster paced industries, biomedical, chemical, or electrical, you may not be required to do it, but it still looks good. It speaks to your ambition. It speaks to what you want for yourself as a professional, because some letters at the end of your name, whether you need them or not in your career, is a good thing, okay? So I encourage all of you to do it for sure.
I'll tell you that from my perspective, I took the FE before I graduated from school, and I'll tell you that it is very academic based, very textbook. So I definitely agree with all of them. Take them before you leave school. I am a mechanical engineer, and I also work for the Navy. So having a PE doesn't really it's not really a critical component. The Navy requires a bunch of other certifications that I have and hold, and so those are more critical from their perspective. I will tell you that some of the things you look at when you're talking about getting a management position or another leadership position at work is that females are often graded on their likability. Things like having a direct manner or your perceived aggression for going up can sometimes work against you because you're not being nice, you're not being feminine enough. And one thing I will say is be true to yourself, is because once you get into that position, you're never going to want to put on this mask of who you are. And that if a company can't recognize or notice that they're doing unfair stereotypes, and if you can't talk to them about it, then you'll probably want to look for a position elsewhere, because you're gonna have to fight all that time to be who you are. And one of the things that really comes up is women tend to evaluate women pretty hard. I realized that a few weeks after I started, one of the girls in my office, when I wore a skirt to work, says, wow, you're wearing a skirt in an engineering field? It's like you're making us all look bad. And then stuff like that. And then when there was some leadership roles coming up, I was in my boss's office briefing him on something that happened when I was on travel. And both myself and another female in the group were being considered for this lead position within our group. And she's like, how can you go into his office? That makes you look bad, and you look like you're sucking up to him. And I was like, I was in there briefing him for work. And when you talk about things with work, it's best to just be true to yourself and to conduct yourself with integrity. And when you get a position, by doing that, you can look back on yourself and know that you did what was best and what was true for you, regardless of what other people's perceptions are of what you should be.
I'll continue along with that point. Make sure that as you're going through the rest of your education, that you try different things, try different positions, and see what works for you. Maybe a management position won't make you happy. Maybe just being a hardcore engineer, getting your hands dirty every day is what you want to do instead of more of the business and analytic side of things. So go out there, try different things, find out what's best for you. When I was in school, I had no experience with being an entrepreneur. It didn't even cross my mind when I was going to school. And yet, here I am. I actually started deep space ecology the spring semester of my junior year. And the first couple of months when we got the LLC started, the limited liability company started, I was very much in this state where I was very unsure about whether it would be a success, whether I was right for this position, being the founder and chief science officer. I didn't have experience with being an entrepreneur, and these thoughts just kept going through my head. And when you allow these thoughts to take control of you, it can affect your work and your actions. So my dad, who's actually in the audience, He is the CEO of my company because he's more the business side of things. I'm more the science side of things. He was always my rock when it came to sitting me down and giving me confidence and really showing me that I can take on the load and that I have the knowledge and the ability to take on this position with this company that I created. And from that experience, I was able to gain more confidence. I was able to show that confidence to other people. And so going with that, surround yourself with people who will lift you up. Surround yourself with friends, family members, co-workers, your fellow students who will give you the confidence and acknowledge when you're doing things right and brilliantly, and even when you're doing things completely wrong. And it will really help you develop what you see yourself doing in your career and in your future.
Well, my next question is going to be, what are people doing right? There we go. That's a really good one. So thinking future, what are some great things that you've seen? Of course, Jake, you have plenty to speak on this. What are some great things that you've seen in bringing about this change in the workplace? Academia, it's never easy, but you do have this kind of space where you're in an educational space and you can take that initiative, but in the workplace, the focus is often on the work. And we could talk about how diversity makes the work better, but when it comes to the people, sometimes it doesn't always translate. What have you seen in your own career journey and your own work that has been a really solid example for how to bring diversity and inclusion and your own identity into the work that you're doing and make the workplace or whatever you're venturing on even better?
Sure, I'll start. This was touched on a little bit earlier. I think Mel had some good things to add. But there will be moments, and this goes out to the men out there, and also I think it's really important for women engineers to know it as well. But there will be lots of moments where, if you're in a group environment or a board meeting or something like this, or it can be as casual as a coffee talk with colleagues or whatever, but there will be moments when you can kind of sense that the woman team member kind of wants to say something, but that male speaks over her and the opportunity is never achieved. But everyone kind of was there for that split-second micro moment where they could sense it, but then it is everyone's responsibility to make sure that you almost invite it out, or just to enable them to have a voice and say, well, let's hear what Sandy has to say, or something else. So just whenever you can, being an advocate for women having a voice, minorities having a voice, and making sure that you are doing your part in any opportunity, big or small. And it can be as simple or as large scale as when you have a panel of speakers at a non-SWE event, making sure that you have all types of demos there. And again, the coffee environment would be the smallest example. So just paying attention to this stuff in every minute of your day is important, I think.
I think what you mentioned is very important. It's really about speaking up. And you can speak up at any level. So at PICO, we have a whole diversity initiative, which I love. I'm actually the diversity lead out in where I'm at in my region. And we do events and we have meetings to discuss topics. But as a personal person, what I do is I bring the person in the meetings with me. So whether it's a male or female engineer, I have my co-op shadow me and come in my meetings, and I introduce them and make sure that they have a voice. So they know they have a voice at any level. So when you graduate and you get in those higher ups, it's important that you give other people a voice in those meetings as well, bring them along. And if you are co-oping, if your manager says, oh, I'm going to this meeting, you ask them, do you mind if I attend? So you can start to get a sense of what the playground is like, whether it's a board meeting, any meeting. So just because they don't invite you, speak up and say, hey, do you mind if I attend with you? We don't always remember those things, when we're going managers, as we're going to meetings and all, but we do want you to be a part of that. So I would just say, try to get that experience now so you can hear the conversations that happen in these meetings as well. That's what would be my advice. And get involved in diversity. If there isn't a diversity at a company that you're at, say, hey, we implement a diversity topic. So every meeting at PICO, we have a safety message and a diversity message. You can start small and say, hey, can we have a diversity message at our meetings? That's something small. You don't have to have a big meeting about. So you can be champions for diversity, where you're at.
So when it comes to considering future positions and where to go, a lot of people fall in a traditional path, or what they think is a traditional path. I know at my organization, your typical manager will outline that you have your 2 tracks you can follow. You can take the technical path where you become what they call a high grade, but on the technical side where you're an expert in that given system, or you can go up on the management side. And the perception is that if these technical positions are opened and then they're in case you haven't heard the rumor, government people tend to stay in those positions for a really long time. So, someone gets in, they're in there for 15, 20 years, it's not going to open up in a while, but managers tend to move a little bit more. And so a lot of people think that the natural way to get in, or the easiest way to get in, is management. Like I said at the beginning, I'm going to be taking a detail assignment down to DC. A lot of people forget that the Navy is a really large organization. It's not just the one division in Philadelphia. There's a lot of opportunities, but a lot of people, they think about, especially if they have families, moving their families and relocating them. But I wouldn't, and those are things you have to consider. But when you're young, you have a lot of opportunities to go out there, take those risks, try something new, go to a new location. Don't limit yourself based on what people who may have those limitations already on them, or are concerned about moving their kids, or if they're divorced, shared custody, and they can't go outside of a certain locale. If you don't have those limitations, go take that extra risk. Go outside of your comfort zone and try something new. Don't follow the traditional ladder, and don't think of it just as a ladder. There's a lot of lateral moves you can make to give yourself a great deal of opportunities.
I guess to the, most of the audience is younger engineers or students. I think it's important to try to, you can ask questions. Asking questions is good. It's also good to try and think more broadly about what your assignment is on any given project, and try and understand its framework, its position in the framework, or whatever that business is. Because you want to try and understand sort of the bigger picture. I know that on my particular work, when we have younger engineers work on it, and it is a little difficult sometimes to have younger engineers work as experts, no offense, but they don't have experience, so they can't be experts. But I try to solicit opinions or their understanding of the problem and the nature of the problem and possible causes before I offer my own, because I don't want to bias them into agreeing with me. If we do that, we end up losing the advantage that multiple eyes have when looking at a problem. But if you start to try and understand your assignment in the bigger picture of the project, and the project in the context of what the business is, typically your manager will appreciate that sort of global look. I mean, you don't need to go too broad afield, but try and understand what you're doing relative to the big picture of the project and the bigger picture of what the business does.
So, the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. Turning that a little bit differently, treat others the way they want to be treated. Just by changing the ending of that phrase, it changes your mindset. You're actually thinking about the other person and not yourself. How do they want me to speak to them? How do they want to be represented? So when it comes to having diversity in the workplace and inviting diversity into the workplace, being more mindful about other people is very important, and how they want you to treat them. And there's something else I had in my mind.
You're about to think of it.
Yes, I'm about to think about it. Let's see. Yes, that's right. Just as an example, I was reading a magazine article. It was an entrepreneur magazine. And there was this one woman named, I believe her name was Boz St. John. And she is an African-American woman, and she got a executive or director position with Uber right before the CEO left the company, right when they were having all these problems with sexual harassment allegations, all this stuff happening. And the first thought that comes into my head is, why would you want to get into that situation, especially when it's going to be so much against you as a person and how you identify? But the more you think about it, by getting into those challenging situations, you can make the most difference. And that's what she was going for. She's like, this was the perfect opportunity for me to step in and make a change, particularly when a change was needed. And so don't be afraid to step into those challenging situations. Of course, look into yourself, make sure it's right for you before you do anything. But don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to go to a job that historically is male-dominated, like engineering. Don't be afraid to take on an executive or manager position when it's all males on the board. Just know that just by taking on that challenge and really working and showing other people that you have the guts and the drive to get things done will start changing their minds as well. You can become an example that can open up a pathway for other people like you to get into the industry. And in the process, you could actually change the way the industry goes and even save a company millions of dollars like Uber.
All right, one question, one of these audience-submitted questions is really interesting. They ask, when you're working at a higher level position, and as you've sort of advanced or pivoted in your career, do you experience more or less sexism, racism, any sort of anti-ism that could be against you?
So I don't think it's based on level. I think that it's basically the people. So people who have that issue can be at any level. So it's not if you're at the director level that you're going to experience it. It's certain people have issues in that they, no matter what level they're at. So I didn't experience at this level I'm at now, but I experienced a little bit, at my lower levels. It's really individual to a person, and it doesn't make it right. So my answer to that is just, it's not at a level. It's people who have issues, and they can be at any level. So that's my answer.
Yeah.
So on that note, I definitely agree that at any level you can face those challenges, and then what you have as somebody that comes from a diverse background or from a minority, you have this opportunity to speak up for other people who are at maybe a perceived lower level, who don't have the opportunity to speak up for themselves, and that by doing so by example, you kind of open the door and make it okay. And I'll give you an example. I was on board a ship, and in the military, they have very strict rules about what you can say to a superior. And so you don't always have these opportunities to defend yourself, or sailors may not feel that they can. And we were standing in a freezer, so you're talking something that's 5 degrees, and a senior enlisted person was harassing one of the younger enlisted people, a junior sailor, about the fact that they put on this insulated coverall to keep themselves warm. And it's like, you're talking about something that's 5 degrees. It's going to be cold. You're standing there trying to take something apart that's metal with your hands, and so you don't have gloves. You're cold. And this guy kept making multiple comments about how this young sailor, who's a male, had no balls because he was wearing this insulated jacket. And it got to a point where I didn't think it was appropriate, and I thought he was going overboard. So when the senior person paused between comments, I looked at the junior sailor and said, "Intelligent decision-making does not imply you're lacking anything," and then walked past. So Like you may not have. So if you give voice when somebody else may not think they have any, then if someone sees something where you're in an uncomfortable situation, whether or not it's with a superior or with a junior member in your organization, they may be able to speak up as an outsider and give that person a perspective that doesn't put you in a bad position, whether it's with superiors or with junior members of your organization. So keep that in mind.
All right, we're going to open up the floor. We have about 10 minutes. So if you have a question, you could get one lovely card holder thing, put it on your phone, put it on your fridge, put it on a notebook.
It's fine.
So at work,
Just try it.
okay. Well, at work, how would you call someone who is superior to you? How would you call them out if they have good intentions, but it's kind of putting you in an uncomfortable situation? Like, personally, I have had very senior engineers talk to me about, like, very ethnic foods that are not my ethnicity, and I don't know how to react in this situation, and that I can't necessarily call them out on it, but how would you respond to that?
Great question. So I would highly advise you not to call them out because that probably wouldn't be good for you. But you have two things you can do. Serious companies, you might find yourself in a bad situation if you're working for a 6-person startup or something like this, which is highly possible, and I think those are also progressive groups of people, so maybe that's a good fit. But usually there's an HR department which can be your best friend. So I would suggest that you communicate with people who, an HR manager or someone who can give you advice on this. And then the second thing, and they usually, it will work itself out that way. I've had to do that with bosses that I conflict with, and they will help you out. And the second thing is, if this is an organization that you believe in and you want to be a part of it, then you are going to have tough conversations with bosses, always, always. Whether that's about things like you mentioned, which is very challenging, or as simple as salary or the path that you're on. So if you want to stay with that company, it's okay to just open up with your boss and say, I wasn't really sure what you meant by this, I have some questions, and try to establish the level playing field. And maybe have him understand that you don't believe that it was appropriate for that person to mention these things. And then if you're still not feeling that reciprocity, maybe that company isn't for you, right? Really believe in that. You have to feel good about the place that you work for. Otherwise, it's a really good way to hate your life.
I would say that it's important to speak up. And say, one, educate people one. So if that's not the type of food history, from where you're from, I would just say that. If they still don't get it, then, and this is not about food, but just in general, when you have an issue with somebody, you should go and talk to them first and give them the opportunity to make it right. That's where I'm going. Then if it don't, that's when you go to the next level. Whether it's manager, whether it's HR, but you should always speak up and basically give that person the opportunity to either make it right or continue to do wrong, and then somebody else will make it right for them. So.
If I could just add one more thing. When it comes to dealing with things like where people might be judging you based on your ethnicity or your race or something you might perceive as harassment, if you're not sure if it's a one-off thing and they're just making a mistake, just write down what happened, and you can talk to them about it and write that you discussed it with them, and just record it. And then if for some odd reason, even when you talk to them about it and they say they're going to make improvements and they don't change, you have that record to go back to and keep track of it. Because unfortunately, if time passes or a lot of time passes between incidents, it's going to be a he said, she said thing, or a he said thing. And if you just keeping a record doesn't automatically mean your coworkers are a bad thing. So everyone makes slip-ups before. So that would be my recommendation. Just keep track of it and then give them the opportunity to improve themselves. And if you need to go to that next step, you'll have that document to back it up.
And to reiterate what I said with my initial story at the beginning, also observe the person. Maybe that person, that's just their personality, and the way they're treating you is how they treat everyone. So it's not necessarily directed at you, depending on the action or words that they gave. So make sure that you're also observant of that person. And yes, speak up, be direct with them, but also be kind, be professional at all times.
Wow. Let's do 2 more questions. Is that okay? Okay. And everybody can stick around after and keep the conversation going.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to introduce myself and my colleague. My name is Maura O'Connor. I work in the Cooperative Education Office at Steinbright. This is Michelle Spina. She also is on the co-op team. We are so thankful that we are able to participate in this. Today, we're learning quite a bit about your stories. That's why we're here. Thank you also, panelists, everyone. We're shocked a little bit by what we're hearing and want to make sure we send the invitation to everyone here. Please come to us. Please come to your co-op coordinator, or if you're not a co-op student, Steinbright, the career services side of things. There's always someone here who's willing to listen, who's willing to help you, to advocate for you. So thank you so much for your stories. And again, please, you can see one of us today. If you want, I'll stay around, both of us stay around a little bit longer after. So this was not so much a question as a plea to please, an invitation. Come and see us. We are willing and happy to help you. I might ask a question now. About mentorship. Can any of you talk about how, if you haven't been assigned a mentor in your respective workplace, how you've gone about advocating for yourself and asking for a mentor? Thank you.
This is my favorite topic. So I'd like to start with that mentorship isn't something that you get. Mentorship is something that you do. And that what I mean is how you can attract a mentor. Because what most mentors would say is that most mentees, the people who are receiving mentorship, most mentees actually suck because they don't normally do what the mentors say. They miss opportunities, because typically opportunity is dressed in overalls and looks like work. Someone famous said that, I don't remember who it was. But if you really want to find a mentor in your life, you have to be going above and beyond. And my biggest thing is becoming a personal brand yourself and telling your story, whether it's a student in engineering, and all of you should be talking about how you were at this event today. And if that becomes a part of your track record, that the first thing people think about when they think of you is that you're a future leader in engineering, whether you're a minority woman, whatever you are, that these are the types of things that mentors want to be a part of. And they want to see you succeed. So it starts with making sure that you're going above and beyond everything that you can do. And if you put out content, you write stuff, you put it on LinkedIn, or you have some sort of blog about your road, or you do more on your Instagram than just photos of your food, and you talk about this event, and you talk about your senior design projects or whatever, but these are the things that people can do to attract a mentor, for sure.
And if you have questions about personal branding, I'm sure your career center has people who are excellent at that. That's where I learned about personal branding, was through the career center at my university. And so, my goodness, I just keep blanking. What was I? Okay. Okay. How much time do we have? So most of the time, the way I got mentors with my research was through cold calling and cold emailing, because the research I was doing at Duke, nobody else was doing. I was creating my own research. And so I had to contact a lot of professors. Most of them were graduate level professors, and I was an undergraduate at the time. And I was eventually able to get professors to help me with my research and gave me a lot of independence with it. So do not be afraid to cold call, cold email people, especially as a student, because people are so much more open to speaking with you while you're a student. Once you hit that professional level, they close up because they think you're going to steal something from their business model, personal experience. And so make sure you're taking those steps. A cool fact about my research is I was able to get 2,000 pounds of Mars regolith simulant for my research through cold calling a scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And he thought what I was doing was really cool, so he directed me to the people who were in charge of sending out that mixture. And they thought what I was doing was cool, so they're like, let's just donate 2,000 pounds to your project. So I got it for free. And as a student, that's like the word you look for, free something. So that was wonderful. So you never know what may happen. I was expecting to pay a lot for that. And then I'm also a Brooke Owens Fellow. So some of you may have heard about the Brooke Owens Fellowship or may be applying right now. It's pretty much an organization that's dedicated to helping undergraduate women enter the space industry through providing them with mentors and paid internships. And through the Brooke Owens Fellowship, I was able to get experience in the consulting research firm in Washington, D.C. I worked with a company called Avocent, and I was in their space industries division. And I had never worked with business analytics in that way before, doing market analyses, things like that. And through that experience, I was able to gain more confidence in the business side of things. So I wasn't only relying on my dad, now I had the knowledge to go off and help run my business more successfully. So make sure that if there's not an opportunity for you, create the opportunity for yourself. Or if there is an opportunity that's there, apply for it. Even if you don't get it, make sure you're just constantly looking out for these things, because you just never know what may happen and what you'll get out of it.
Sure.
So one company, I'm designing mentors are cheerleaders. They are your advocate. They're the ones, when you're not there, they're in the room saying you're awesome. So the first company I got assigned, I was like, yippee. But then the next company, I had to find one. And that's the hard part. So what I ended up doing is having lunch with different people. I work in different groups. I set up lunch dates because it's also about what you want to get out of it. So yes, you want a mentor, but you want to be able to get something from that mentor too. So you want to have that relationship. So what I end up doing is having lunch, and just as a friendship, I didn't say, oh, I want you to be my mentor at lunch. Like, hey, can we have lunch and talk about what you do, basically. And from that, I made more friends that were in leadership. So they weren't, they're not the CEO, but they're managers or directors or other engineers. And so I end up with almost like several mentors at different levels. But I do have a main mentor who I talk to on a regular, who's a friend as well as, I work with and also outside of work, know on a personal level, that's with the company. So you have to basically go out and seek, but it's okay to interview mentors.
I want to get a few more questions in, so if we could just limit the responses to one panelist and we can ask like 2 or 3 more questions, is that okay?
It is 4 o'clock. Do you want to keep going?
Let's just go a couple more minutes, because I feel like we should get some more questions in. So how many people raised their hands?
Speed round panel.
Speed round panelists.
Hi. So at one of my co-ops, I was told that I almost didn't get the job because I was a woman and there just weren't any male applicants who had a good enough resume, so they gave it to me. And I was also told a couple times that because I'm wearing makeup, I'm not looking like an engineer and I can't be taken seriously. And so that has really changed how I act in the professional realm. I find that I kind of stop wearing makeup and wear more boy-like clothes and kind of try to act like the boys. But that's not really me. I'm a very feminine person. But I don't want it to affect my career path negatively and my work negatively and my connections in work. So I just kind of was wondering if you have any insight on making that balance properly without it negatively affecting you.
Well, I certainly can't speak from the women's perspective. If those are co-ops that you worked at, alert the co-op office, and you ought to warn those companies that they are walking into major liabilities, lawsuits. I mean, I can't imagine anybody being more boneheaded than saying, well, we only hired you because we couldn't find any guys who had a good resume. That's just like, duh, you know? I mean, really, that's just astounds me. Actually, the young woman mentioned it, and I was going to say your co-op office should be a spot to go to, and I should hope that the co-op office properly brings that back to the company, saying, you know, some of our co-ops have had some issues, because that's just mind-bogglingly stupid. I mean, I can't use any other word. It's just mind-bogglingly stupid. You just don't do that. I mean, I'm stunned. I'm stunned that any company that would be operating today, some person would say something, so you shouldn't wear makeup because you don't look like an engineer. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely
crazy.
ridiculous. I know that we said one panelist per response, but just to directly give you some sort of answer, I mean, you're always going to have people who tell you what they think you should be and what you should do in your life all the time. And the more success you accumulate in your life, which I'm assuming that all of you are going to be massively successful, that's why you're here today. But the more success you have, the more haters you're going to find as well, right? Always, seriously. But you have to be confident that you're going to be the person that you become. And Morgan mentioned something about figuring it out along the way. I call that hummingbirding, right? You're trying to figure out what is best for you. You found the garden. You don't really know which flowers are your favorite yet. But the makeup thing, that's your choice. What you wear at work, that's your choice. If you speak up or if you want to be a leadership, these are your decision-making points that you have to figure out for yourself. And anyone who's telling you that, oh, no, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, speak up about it directly to them. Be like, well, or just do it in your actions. Wear the makeup if you want. Dress how you like. Wear that skirt if you want. Whatever. So don't listen to the haters, guys. Seriously. They just hate.
I'm sorry, but I just have to say.
Go for it.
Be who you are. You have options. Like, you're not, I hear this story a lot where I feel like I can't move. We're engineers. We are women. We can do what we want. So you don't have to stay in a situation. You can move to other companies, research companies. On my resume, my objective line says, I'm looking for a diverse company that's into advanced technology, somewhere along. But the first thing is diverse. So you want to feel comfortable. I said, always be like, how do you always be happy at work? And I'm like, because I chose it. So you have to really, don't change for anyone, but know that you do not have to stick somewhere. There's so many opportunities and tech out there. Do not stay somewhere where you're not happy.
Thank you. Is there one more maybe? Okay. And then we can be done, I promise.
So I have a friend, he's a white straight male, and he went to an inclusion and diversity event, and he felt bad of who he was as a person afterwards. So how do we educate and change biases without making the represented person the unrepresentative? Because now he, instead of speaking up and saying his mind, is questioning everything about himself and is now quiet versus giving his ideas and opinions. So how do we educate without downplaying their importance as well? Because we always hear that, I feel like, nowadays.
I suppose what you might want to say to him is, and I think it was pointed out earlier in the program, think about what sort of behavior or what sort of treatment he would receive that would make him unhappy. Don't do that to other people. Chances are, if you do things that you think, oh, other people are going to hate that, they probably will. If you would hate it being done to you, they probably will. So just try not to do that. I mean, there's no, he doesn't have to worry about, how shall I call it, his demographic hegemony anytime soon. There's going to be a lot of white men in engineering for a while now, so I think he's probably pretty comfortable in that regard. And it's not a desire to kind of make people feel bad, just sort of make people feel sensitized to the idea that try not to do things to people that you would hate if they were done to you. It seems pretty simple to me, but for some reason people find that complex.
And I'll just add in one thing. I've had that similar discussion with some young sailors, both white, both in an engineering field, and they look at me like, well, we can't make jokes anymore. We can't do anything. We can't say anything. And I told them, I was like, it's not about making jokes or to stymie your sense of humor or prevent you from speaking your mind. It's about, the whole goal is to create a safe work environment for everyone, whether you're white, male, female, black, Hispanic, an opportunity where you can speak up and say, hey, I'm a little uncomfortable with where that line of humor may be going. Do you mind if we cut back on that? And I work in an environment with sailors. They can be a bit crude. They're very fond of the term bitch. And I'm not comfortable in that kind of work environment. I don't like that word. So when even the first time they mention it, I simply ask them not to use it. And they may not stop using it in all of their conversations, but they don't use it around me. So it's about creating that safe place, regardless of whether or not someone is part of the majority or minority. You need to be able to speak your mind. So if they're not feeling safe or they're feeling harassed for being a white male, they just need to speak up and say, hey, I'm not going to be that stereotypical guy. Give me the opportunity to.
All right, I'm going to close for today. Real quick, on the topic, on the theme of one word, what is one word you would use to describe engineering to you? It's my favorite thing.
Can I do a hyphenated word?
Yes.
Problem solving. Problem solving.
That's what I was thinking. Awesome.
Execution. Finding the solution and implementing it.
Yeah, to harmonize what Mickey says, mine would be exciting. If you guys aren't paying attention to what's happening in the world right now and getting excited about where your careers can go, like any industry that you're in, you can probably have an awesome career. So it's the best time to be alive. It's right now. Okay? It is. So it's exciting. So I'm glad you guys are a part of that.
Scientist on the board. I have a lot of engineering friends, so I would have to say personal, because the way you approach engineering, the way you will approach your different projects will be reflective of who you are as a person and your thoughts and your experiences and the way you incorporate all that together to make such a effective and stunning end solution.
All right, that is the end of our event today. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. A round of applause for our panel. So much for being here today. And thank you, all of you, for being here today. We're so happy you made it. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Go meet them outside, get some more food, and hopefully you will see us again in May.